I'm David Wilson, the Clerk of the House of Representatives, and I thought I'd outline for you some of the major steps we've taken in transforming our Parliament in the digital space, a little bit about our approach and some of the environmental factors that I think are relevant to the approach we've taken. Then, of course, I'm happy to answer questions. So to begin with, the New Zealand Parliament has moved towards digital operations where that makes sense for three main reasons. The first one is to enable faster, easier access to proceedings and papers for members of Parliament. The second is to make it easier for the public to engage with the democratic process, and that's been a real focus of the Parliament over the last 5 to 10 years. And the final one, which I think is newer than the others, is to make the Parliament more resilient. And that very much is a response to COVID-19 and some of the challenges that highlighted. So some of the digital changes we've gone through, I think the first major one in 2001 was moving our written parliamentary questions from a paper-based system to a digital one, where it's remained ever since. That's seen the process greatly increase in speed and efficiency, and a huge increase in the number of questions lodged to ministers as well. So it's helped opposition MPs in particular get more information about government actions and hold the government to account. We have about 45,000 written questions a year. In 2008, we launched e-committee, an electronic committee system for members, mainly with the aim of that first objective of enabling them to get faster access to information and manage it better. That has gone through several iterations since, but has been a successful approach, which is now integral to the way that members operate on committees. In 2017, again with committees, we started using Zoom to hear public submissions. So evidence had previously been gathered by face-to-face meetings, usually in the capital in Wellington, but also by committees travelling around the country. By moving to using Zoom as well as a supplement to face-to-face meetings, the reach of the Parliament greatly increased. Although New Zealand is not very big on the map, it is a relatively long, narrow country. It doesn't have very many people, and so transport can be quite difficult. It does have pretty good levels of digital connection though, and so hearing evidence on Zoom has worked incredibly well. More recently, in 2018, we started receiving petitions electronically. That's seen about a trebling in the number of petitions that people lodge with Parliament. It's a really ancient process, but it's one that has come up to date quite nicely through the use of digital media. It's enabled us to moderate ideas for petitions before they are launched, which helps the petitioner, I think, make sure that they're going to ask Parliament to do something they can actually do. There have been a few unforeseen consequences as well, which I might talk about in questions. That brings us up to 2020, when in March, February, March in New Zealand, it became clear that the Parliament wasn't going to be able to sit during the pandemic. I took some proposals to our business committee, which is a cross-party committee of members. They invited me to make some suggestions. One of them was that our select committees could meet remotely, which wasn't something that had currently been allowed, and that most of the other business of Parliament could be done digitally. They were a bit sceptical at first, but as the pandemic advanced pretty quickly, they agreed to it. We took our committees online, set up a special committee for examining the government's response to the pandemic, which was very widely watched by the public. We televised it, as well as having it on other media platforms. And it did a pretty good job of holding the government to account and also informing the public about what was going on at a time when they were all locked down at home. So it was pretty well viewed and received. That, although it was done as a sort of an emergency response, was so popular that it has become a permanent feature of our Parliament, so that committees can always meet electronically and can also meet in person when they want to. That led to us permanently webcasting and televising committee meetings as well. And then in 2022, later than a lot of other countries that did this, but as it became clear that COVID-19 was around for a while, we also moved to remote participation in plenary sessions. So sittings of the House itself, members were able to participate through some changes to technology, essentially again through making a Zoom call, but also some changes to our procedural rules. to enable members to participate remotely. And that has meant that the Prime Minister, when she had COVID-19, and the Leader of the Opposition had it when other important figures were having to isolate but were not too unwell to participate, Parliament was actually able to go on and members were able to be questioned, it was able to legislate. So those more recent responses have really been driven by COVID and about, I suppose, making the Parliament more robust and responsive in times of unforeseen challenges. In terms of our approach, I suppose the first thing is we don't make things digital just for the sake of it. There are a lot of huge advantages, and I've outlined a few, I think, of the advances we've made, but there are times where it just doesn't make sense for a variety of reasons. When we have a ballot for non-government bills to be introduced, we draw numbered tokens out of an old biscuit tin. It's a bit quaint, but it's also free and doesn't need updating, servicing, it never breaks down. We use a spreadsheet to track the attendance of MPs because these are fairly simple things and technology really doesn't offer anything. While it obviously has huge advantages in many of these other applications, I guess we just keep in mind it isn't always the only answer. And a lot of this thinking is driven by staff in my organisation and by MPs, our views of what Parliament needs. So we're pretty wary of, I suppose, of just grabbing new technological solutions because they exist, but where we see something will be useful to us and will either enhance our ability to do parliamentary business or make it easier to reach the public and engage them, we'll certainly be very keen on it. We try and use off-the-shelf applications wherever possible because it makes updating and maintaining and use much easier. We've moved away from, I think, our earlier history of having a lot of bespoke in-house app development, which is really hard to look after, particularly if the developer leaves. We're a small organisation with a limited budget. I'm aware of the depreciation cost as well. And so these are some of the things that guide us. I guess just quickly in terms of some of the environmental factors for us, our governance model makes this sort of approach reasonably easy. As clerk, I'm an independent statutory officer. I don't take direction from MPs or the Speaker, although I do answer to them for the spending of taxpayers' money, of course. So we consult MPs, we seek an endorsement of modernisation ideas, including digital ones, particularly where they affect MPs. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that doesn't directly affect them that we just don't discuss, but where things do, we certainly do. We develop the ideas, we then present any necessary changes to our rules of procedure, our standing orders, and then get a final endorsement from senior MPs before we launch anything. And one of my early experiences in Parliament of probably not getting that endorsement at every stage I should have really did backfire. It was a life lesson for me to always engage with MPs where you need to do that and to make sure they're on board and don't assume that you know best. At the same time, as I say, we do have some freedom about that, which was really useful. I suppose some of the constitutional elements of New Zealand's setup also help in that our standing orders, our rules of procedure govern all parliamentary procedure. Legislation generally doesn't. We've got no written constitution and no judicial oversight of any parliamentary activity, so it does make decision-making reasonably straightforward. The final thing I thought I'd mention are just some of the future challenges as I see them. One of them for us as I say, a small organisation is budget. We are reliant on the government to fund the Parliament. We have an initiative at the moment where we're proposing that Parliament actually makes its own funding decisions. Our Treasury Department's not all that keen on that, but we'll see what happens. But I think in terms, for parliamentary independence, for better decision making in a more robust institution, I do think that's important. I suppose one of the other things that we all know is that technology changes fast, and it can be difficult if we spread ourselves too thin across too many applications to keep up. We're also, because we have around 110 staff who are mostly procedurally focused, we rely on contractors for most of our technology support, which again is expensive, but we really don't have the capacity to develop that in-house, and I don't think we want to. It's just not something we're good at. And then I suppose the other thing is matching, and this is I'll talk about in the session I'm appearing in tomorrow as well. Matching some of the fast changes in technology, where we're adopting them, with parliamentary rules to make sure that our proceedings are legitimate. You can imagine where we allow remote participation for the first time, or in either the House, the plenary sessions, or in committees, that ensuring they are regarded as legitimate sittings by the House and by the courts is important. I suppose for the future, one question I have that's likely for New Zealand is, will the remote participation in the House endure? Parties certainly made use of it, members used it during the height of the COVID pandemic here, and also during the occupation of Parliament grounds in February and March, where access to the building was quite difficult. It did show it had some uses, and I suppose COVID-19 has taught us there may well be other illnesses, pandemics, or challenges in the future where remote participation could continue to be a really good tool. New Zealand's also earthquake prone, as some of you might know. The capital city, Wellington, where the Parliament is located on a major fault line. And so it may be that some digital solutions could be part of our robustness there and our disaster preparedness. So it remains to be seen what happens with that, but it's certainly been a useful tool. And with that, that's a pretty quick summary, I suppose, of some of the things that we've been doing, some of the changes we've made and my thinking about them. I'd be very happy to answer any questions.